Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are today. My name is Chris Mitchell. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Inflow Communications, and I'm going to be leading today's webinar. So thanks for joining. We're going to be talking about the Mitel server capabilities limitations. We get a lot of questions around, what does HQ server do? What do your DVSs and DVMs do? So we're going to kind of be talking through that today. If you haven't had a chance to hit our website and see some of our upcoming webinars, we have a work from home with Ring Central, a webinar coming up. We have an automating your customer engagement strategy. That's for like our contact center customers. And then we have at the end of the month, a Mitel Shorttel 14.2 to connect migration webinar coming up. So I know we just planned our all of our August webinars a few weeks ago, so those should be getting added to our website probably in the next week or so as well. So hit that and check out upcoming webinars that we have. Quick agenda here. Well, I'll just do a quick introduction of Inflow, and then I'll jump right into the headquarters and DVS functions. And then I'll save a little bit of time at the end for question and answer, and then I'll end up with a contact us page if you have future questions. You want to maybe have a call with a sales engineer and your account manager or something like that, or if you're not a current customer of ours, we're more than happy to hop on it, and talk through the different functions and how you can implement, them in your system for better redundancies as well. So who is Inflow Communications? We're a unified communications and contact center company. That's all we do. That's our sole focus. We work on the Shorttel, Mitel platforms. We're a platinum partner with them. We're a Ring Central delivery partner and a Genesis, Pure Cloud Gold partner. So we kind of pick a few platforms and just specialize in them. We have offices, employees in 10 states, soon to be 11. I think we have an employee relocating to a new state, so we're getting ready to get that set up. We have over 250,000 endpoints that we support with 800 customers. So our customers span all over the United States with worldwide locations. We're maniacal about our customer experience. You can hit our website, see our customer comments about cases. You can see our response times, customer satisfaction scores, all that stuff. We publish right on our website, right out of Salesforce. Our customers span all kinds of different, markets, locations, everything. This is just a couple of, our customers that you probably recognize. All right, well, enough about Inflow. Let's jump right in. So, like I said, today we're going to be talking about headquarters and DVS or DVM. It used to be called DVM, distributed voicemail. Now they're called distributed voice servers. So I'm going to be kind of talking through the different functions of a headquarters server and which of those services can be backed up by a DVS, and in some cases, what can be backed up by a voice switch. So we'll kind of talk through the different functions. If you have questions, feel free to post them in the question section as we're going. I'll try to answer them on the different slides, but I think I have like 4 different slides of different functions. As I go through the function charts, you're going to notice green means it's a function that server fully handles. Yellow means that it can handle a portion of that functionality, and red means it can't handle any of that functionality. So you'll see the different colors, on the different in the tables that we're talking through today. All right, so this is where you can see that, on the left side, this is our headquarters server. So the left side is really going to be all the different functions that the headquarters server performs. They're always going to be green because they're headquarters server functions. On the right side is our DVS, DVM, and it's either going to be green, yellow, or red. Like I said, green means that the services are fully functional, which means the DVS or DVM can fully provide redundancy to the headquarters server. If it's yellow, it means that part of those services, and we'll kind of talk through, what part of those services are, can be backed up. And if it's red, that means none of those services can be pushed over, in most cases to the DVS, DVMs or switches. So the first thing is the shortware director, admin interface. So that's ran by IIS, which means we have a website. We have FTP for firmware. We have SMTP to pass voicemails in different files between the headquarters server and the DVS and the DVMs. So it's yellow because we can provide FTP, firmware services, SMTP for like voicemail, notifications and stuff like that via DVS, DVM. The one thing we can't provide is the admin interface. So if the headquarters server goes down, the admin interface is unavailable. Nobody can log in, make changes to the system. But for all other purposes, the IIS services on each DVS, DVM are still up and running, and they can still function as, under their limited capabilities. So the headquarters server, the next thing is the master copy of the configuration database. So that's your SQL database that stores everything about your system. There's two options you can run now. It's yellow here because by default, each DVS, DVM stores a read-only copy of the configuration database. There is another option when you're setting up a DVS, DVM is to do a distributed database. Distributed database keeps a copy of the database that it can write certain, events to. You can't make changes or anything like that, but it can write, say, call records and stuff like that from a work group assigned to that DVS into a distributed database and stuff like that. But there is, some limitations. Most customers solely run a read-only copy because that way they don't have to worry, about does the distributed database sync, does it sync properly back and forth? We've had more issues with the distributed database, so most of our customers stick to a read-only copy because that still allows them to do call route, all the call routings and stuff like that. Look up and play auto attendance, all the read-only copies, in the RAM of the DVS. So the next thing you see, and it's green on both sides, which is great. This is the telephony management services. So the TMS service, you'll see a lot of time if you ever talk to, to support, and they're like, we need to restart the TMS service. TMS is pretty much what makes all of the system talk to each other. So it does all the switch management, voicemail services management, the call manager services. All of that stuff is all controlled by the TMS service. If TMS isn't working, the switches and the servers won't talk to each other, and you end up with a lot of red connectivity or yellow connectivity in your charts because that service isn't running. And then we typically have to restart the TMS service on the headquarters server and then restart it on the DVSs, in some cases to get everything talking, or do a restart of the system, to get that service up and running. But all of those services are synchronized over to DVS, DVM. And the DVS handles all the short gear switch management and voicemail service management for itself in any switches that are assigned to that DVS. So if you have all of your switches assigned to a DVS, then there's no switch management needing at the headquarters level. So if the headquarters server goes down, we don't lose management of the connectivity of any of our switches. They'll still function properly until the headquarters server comes back up. Schedules. This is a big one, that a lot of people, to ask about is, schedules for like hunt groups. So schedules for hunt groups are applied by the server, and they're applied to switches assigned to that server. So, if there's any switches assigned to the headquarters server, all of the hunt group schedules are turned on and off by that server. So if that server goes down, say at 4:55, and you have a hunt group set to close at 5, that hunt group is not going to close at 5 o'clock until that server comes back up, and then it says, oh, that hunt group is supposed to be in in off hours. Let me go ahead and and turn that to off hours. So the schedules are applied at the server level. So if that server's down, it can't apply. Same thing for hunt groups, but also for work groups assigned to that server. The work group schedules are applying on the server level as well. I'm going to continue to the next slide here. Okay, so the next one is TAPI, so Telephony Application Programming Interface. So this is what controls all of the telephony call control, inside the system. So the switches, do the call build up and tear down and everything like that, but they're getting their, the control and everything to do that from the, whatever server that they're assigned to. So nice thing is this is completely distributed because it depends on which server is handling, managing the switches. So, this doesn't really affect, if TAPI goes down, we lose some telephony controls on the server, in the switches and phones controlled by that server. But we can limit it, to only phones affected, by that server. Same thing with the DTOS, the distributed telephony application. This one is more of a routing service. As requests come in, it realizes, oh, this request needs to be sent to this server, or this switch for TMS purposes, and it's really just a routing service that comes in, mainly used so that the system can expand, beyond, just a few servers or something like that. It just handles, the routing purposes of where those TMS requests go, so that the TMS service itself doesn't have to receive all those requests. So the last one on this page is the master copy of the CDR. This is your reporting database. It's handled on the headquarters server. It's only stored in the headquarters server. The DVS side is yellow because if I have work groups or assigned to that to a DVS or or user reports and stuff like that, it will collect and store those. And you can see it stores them for up to 2 hours. And then when the headquarters server comes back up, it uses SNDP to synchronize those records back into the master CDR database. If you're a customer of ours and you have Brightmetrics relies on the master CDR. So if the headquarters server is down, you can still log into Brightmetrics and you can access some reporting capabilities because Brightmetrics stores summary data in there, so it'll store how many calls came in yesterday or how many calls came in the past week. It'll store the summary data, but it doesn't store the actual data. So if I wanted to say, oh, rather than just give me the summary data, I want to see the actual calls, then it relies on the CDR database to provide that. So you would be able to get summary data from Brightmetrics, but you wouldn't be able to get the detailed data, which is the actual call information that Brightmetrics doesn't want to store. They don't want to be, PII and HIPAA compliant, everything like that. So they don't store any of that data. They can store the number of calls, but as long as they don't store like the caller ID information or, or the recordings or anything like that, they don't have to worry about, about being HIPAA compliant. That's all stored at the customer site still. So if the headquarters server goes down, you will lose, reporting directly through the Shoreware director, and you'll lose detailed reporting through Brightmetrics until that headquarters server comes back up. And then as long as the server was down for less than 2 hours, you won't lose any data that the DVSs were collecting. Once it hits more than 2 hours, we risk running out of storage, allocated storage space for those call records, and they may not be synchronized back to the headquarters server when it comes back up. So far so good. We haven't seen any of the red, yet. We've seen a lot of green, a lot of yellow. So most of the red is still coming up here on the next couple slides. So the headquarters server provides voicemail storage for users assigned to that server. In most of our best practices, we recommend not assigning any of your users to the headquarters server for voicemail purposes. The main reason is if all the users are assigned to a DVS, that headquarters server can back up the DVS for voicemail purposes. It doesn't go the other way. If I have everything assigned to a headquarters server, the DVS can't provide all of the the voicemail services for a DVS can't for the headquarters server. It can go up the tree, but it can't go down the tree with all the functionality. We do have store and forward capabilities for other servers, so the DVS can provide some store and forward services if the headquarters server goes down. Meaning, I tried to reach extension 1234, which is on the headquarters server. I can't reach that extension, so let me go ahead and take this voicemail and I'll store it until the headquarters server comes up, and then I'll SMTP it back over. The way that doesn't function really well is, say a call comes into the headquarters site and it tries to hit the headquarters voicemail server. That call won't be redirected to another site for voicemail purposes. If a call comes into a DVS site and we try to forward it to the headquarters and it's down, then that local DVS will take the the voicemail call and everything like that. So that's a kind of I would say more could be a yellow in some cases, because unless you have a DVS at your headquarters site along with your HQ server, you can't provide full 100% voicemail redundancy at that site. All of the servers do provide recorded names storage for voicemail purposes though. So only if I'm assigned to a DVS, say in Seattle, that server will have all my personal greetings. Thank you for calling Chris Mitchell. I'm unavailable, press 1 to try me on my cell phone or leave a message, after the tone. That full greeting is only stored on your assigned voicemail server. But all the other servers just keep my name. So if you hit my voicemail box on another server and it's going to store and forward it, it's just going to say, you've reached the voicemail box of Chris Mitchell. It's not going to play my whole greeting. It's just going to play the name on that. So all servers do keep copies of names, but not full copies of the greetings. But all servers do keep full copies of auto attendant prompts. So if your system has 100 auto attendants in it, every single DVS that you have will have a full copy of all 100 auto attendants, and every DVS can play those auto attendants, as they come in. So if a call comes into Seattle again, I can play an auto attendant locally in Seattle, and then say, oh, they're actually pressing 1 for accounting, which happens to be in Portland, Oregon. Great, now let me transfer that call. But every single DVS and headquarters server has copies of all auto attendants, so that we can play those prompts, in the case of an outage or to minimize, WAN traffic. So next thing is the CSIS, so the client server internet service. So this is for your desktop client. We used to call it the personal call, call manager, communicator. Now it's called the Connect client. So this is the service that supports running the desktop client. So if you notice, it's green on both because whatever voicemail server you're assigned to will also be your desktop client control server. So if you're assigned to the DVS and that server goes down, those services do fail up to the headquarters server as well. But you can see is whatever server I'm assigned to, is what will control my desktop client. The one thing that isn't backed up is the desktop client authentication. So when you first get set up in the system and you have to authenticate with your desktop client, the authentication service is not distributed. So this is our first, red issue that you see here is that we can, once the desktop client user is set up and they're running, those services are fully, synchronized over to whatever server they're assigned to. But the initial authentication has to occur on the headquarters server. So that server goes down, users who haven't launched, and authenticated their desktop client won't be able to. So work groups, this is, this one's, it's red here, but I'm going to put a little asterisk on this. So work group queuing, every time you build up a work group, you're going to notice that you have to assign a server to that work group. You can pick a headquarters server or a DVS server for that work group, but there's no redundancy in it. So every work group that I build on a headquarters server isn't backed up anywhere else. Any work group I build on the DVS, DVMs aren't backed up to the headquarters server. There's no backup of work groups between servers. If you want to provide redundancy for your work groups, you can, and you could kind of make this like a yellow or a green, depending on how you wanted to do this. Your way to do it would be to create a copy of that work group and assign it to a different server, and then set that backup work group as your backup extension. So a call comes in to a DVS looking for the accounting work group, that DVS is down, the backup extension is set to a backup accounting work group on the headquarters server. So that way I can actually then fail the calls over to a secondary server, still have work group queuing and everything set up via a copy. It's not the same work group, and that's the key, is the same work group is why it's red. But you can use a copy of a work group to provide some redundancies between servers. From a reporting aspect, you will see 2 different work groups, and they will be reported on as 2 separate work groups. So it's and that's the biggest reason it's red there, is it's not true redundancy. Yes, I can make it more redundant, but out of the box, there's no redundancy to that queuing. Account code collection service, this is probably the least used function of everything we've talked about today. Account code is when you pick up your phone and you want to call long distance, your company requires you to put in a long distance code for billing purposes, or account, billing or something like that, or just authorization purposes. So that's what account code collection is just keying in that code to let the system know, yes, I have permission to call long distance or maybe international purposes. And that is only done at the headquarters server level. So if that goes down, depending on how your account code is set up, if it's optional or forced, then it could stop people from being able to call international or long distance if it's a forced account code. If it's optional, it will ask them for it, and then it'll place the call, anyway if the server is unavailable. So your group paging services are ran by your headquarters server. So as you build out paging groups and stuff like that, those are being ran by the headquarters server. We don't back up, services. When you do build out a paging group, you do select which server you want to put that on. So similar to workgroup queuing, is the paging group service has ability to be used on each individual server, but there's no ability to back each other up. If that server's down, that paging group is down. Report generation, we talked about this a little bit, is that CDR record, the CDR database is stored in the headquarters server, which means I can't generate reports inside the system when the headquarters server is down. All right, so the IP phone display service, IPDS, it's what controls on all of your physical phones, your directory button, your options page where you could look at change your ringtone, all that functionality is provided by one of the servers. And there's, whatever server is providing you firmware updates and everything like that via your DHCP scope is where you're going to get this information from. So you can get firmware from a DVS. It's acceptable solution. Most customers point firmware and everything to the headquarters server, but you do have the ability to to point those services at a DVS as well. The IP phone configuration service is similar to a member of the desktop client, where the desktop client works without the headquarters server, but you can't set up new users. Same thing here is phones will work without the headquarters server, but you can't set up and can provision a brand new phone without the headquarters server up. So main reason is even if I'm getting firmware from a DVS, that phone is still going to have to reach out and register with the headquarters server so it can register in the database, and then get assigned to a switch in a backup switch, for functionality purposes. So that functionality does not push over anywhere else. So I can't provision and set up new phones if my headquarters server is down. The distributed routing service, DRS, isn't in use by, I would say, most of our customers. And the main reason is because you don't have to have the service turned on unless you have more than 60 ShoreGear switches in your system. So for most of our customers, that's somewhere in the couple thousand phone range before they hit 60 switches. Sometimes it's as low as 1,000 phones before you hit 60 switches, depending on how many sites and stuff you have. But we have to turn DRS on when you get to above 60 switches, and that's just so that we don't put a huge load on the switches or any one particular server when it comes to routing services. So the event watcher and filter, I don't know if you have any alerts set up in your director where you can say, send me an email when when a 911 call is placed, or send me an email when my D channel, my PRIs go down, or do some kind of an alert when a fan on one of my switches go down. That's all occurring via the event watcher and filter service. So that's ran on a per server basis. So when you build those filters out, you can set it up and say only monitor events on this particular server, or or monitor events on all servers. And that's why you can get green here, is because you can get server specific. So obviously if one server goes down, we're not going to get any SMTP alerts or anything from that server while it's down or where that service is down, but it'll still be working on the other servers and, monitoring for a 911 call from a switch, that's managed by that Seattle server, but not maybe the Portland server. So you can still get SMTP notifications from those Windows servers, or if you happen to have some of those Linux DVS servers, same functionality, just a different OS on it. You can still get SMTP alerts from those as well. So this is one we always get a lot of questions around too, is third-party applications. So if I have maybe a third-party call recording service from, from in-house, or from DVS Analytics, or something like that, or even like I said, Brightmetrics, something like that. Those can be loaded depending on the server requirements. A lot of them don't like to be loaded on the headquarters server. They like to be loaded on DVS. Some are fully supported to be loaded, like Brightmetrics, on your headquarters server. All of those are fully, capable to be loaded on really on any server you want, and that's why you see green here, is because wherever I have those applications loaded, that's the server it's relying on. So I could put all those different integrations on a DVS, and if my headquarters server goes down, none of those integrations, if they're a CAPI integration or whatever, aren't affected by the headquarters server going down, because those services are being monitored, locally on that DVS and being provided locally. So if we had, let's say, a contact center system and we had Brightmetrics for the contact center, if our headquarters server goes down, great, I can still run Brightmetrics reports on that contact center server, because we're not reliant on the headquarters server, to provide those, those third-party application support on that DVS. But we're not backing them up to each other either. So I'm not, if I have a third-party reporting service like Brightmetrics set up on my headquarters server and it goes down, I don't have that. I don't load that. I have that loaded on another server, so that I can still provide reporting service on a different server. So I'm not providing the same redundancy, but I'm not. They're not relying on each other. So if one goes down, applications set up on the other server aren't going to be affected either. So lots of functionality there. So the big takeaways from this is there's a couple things we can't do from a DVS. Is I can't do admin services. I lose reporting when my headquarters server goes down. I can't provision a new IP phone or a new desktop client user. I lose any work groups assigned to any server. Obviously, I can back them up with copies. I also lose my account code and any paging groups that are assigned to that server. I'm just looking through. I think that's yeah, that's really the from a functionality standpoint, those are the things that DVS can't provide. Obviously, it can provide voicemail, auto attend, all those things, but with admin, reporting, provisioning of new users or new phones, account code, and paging, and work group functionality assigned to that. Those are the things I lose when my headquarters server goes down. Not necessarily, it's not going to take your business down. Your customers are still going to be able to call in. I can still route inbound and outbound calls, all that capability with a DVS and different paging groups, backup work groups. Then in that case, if I have paging groups assigned to my DVSs and work groups assigned to my DVSs, my headquarters server goes down, really all I'm losing of importance for most customers is I lose my admin, I lose my reporting, and I can't provision a new user, desktop client or a new phone. Really, that's the three functionality that most customers lose when the headquarters server goes down if you have your DVS set up and you have all your users assigned to your DVS. So functionality-wise, if you don't have DVS set up for your bigger sites, great thing to do. Other thing to consider would be setting up a DVS at your headquarters site and assigning all your users to that DVS so that your headquarters server could be rebooted or could go, have an issue, and you're not necessarily taking everything down at the headquarters site. So I would say that's a newer functionality in the last couple of years that customers have been deploying, is a DVS at their headquarters site, to take off the load of the headquarters server and really make the headquarters server admin reporting and redundancy, because that HQ server will provide voicemail, auto attendant services and everything like that, desktop client services for the DVSs that go down. So really make your headquarters server a backup and put all of the day-to-day processing on your DVS, DVMs at your different sites. That's typically what we're seeing is the best practice moving forward for most of our customers. I think I answered every question that came in as I was going. So if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to us. Put a call into your account manager or AE sales rep. We're more than happy to hop on a call, talk through your configuration, and if there's some questions around how we can provide better redundancy from a server perspective, great. We're more than happy to grab an engineer, hop on a call, talk through what that would look like. What does it take to get a DVS set up at your headquarters site? We can talk through that process. What the timeline, and downtimes and stuff like that look like. We're more than happy to talk through that with you as well. So thanks for joining today. If you have questions, like I said, feel free to reach out. We're always here to answer questions. Thanks for joining today, and have a good day.